Welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Nathan Shaw. I'm a TME for the TSBU, and in today's set of modules, we're going to talk about tuning the CTS3000 camera cluster. We're going to go through everything from the tools to some details on the actual cluster, to installing the cluster, the focus, white balance, fine-tuning, and all the related details. Thanks again for joining us. Let's get started. So in this module, we're going to talk about the tools required for tuning the CTS3000 camera cluster. So let's start with a Phillips head screwdriver. This is a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. We also have a small Allen wrench collection. We have a 3.0 millimeter Allen wrench. We have a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. And we have a 0.9, very small 0.9 millimeter Allen wrench. Now, the new cameras, this is not required. We're using thumb screws, which you'll see later on. But it's good to have in the kit because the older cameras will require this 0.9 millimeter Allen wrench. We also have another set of tools here. It's actually the same sizes, a 3.0 millimeter, 2.5 millimeter, and 0.9 millimeter. These are just a little longer and custom tools just to show you that you can use whichever tools you want as long as they match the Allen wrench sizes that we mentioned here. We also have a measuring stick. We have a small camera target. And we have a large camera target. These items come with the CTS3000, so you'll get a box that come with all these tools in them. The large target will require some assembly. You need a couple screws here, couple Phillips head screws here, couple here at the top, and also a couple here at the top. It's really basic assembly, so it shouldn't be too complicated. One thing you might want to note is whenever you're sliding in the cardboard, you want to make sure that these black lines right here line up with the metal on both sides. So that's really important whenever we're focusing the camera. So these are all the tools you'll need for tuning the CTS3000 camera cluster. In this module, we're going to talk about some of the details of the camera cluster itself. Here we have the camera cluster hood and lenses. Here we have the camera processor bracket mount. So it will arrive in the box just like this. It'll come screwed, so you have 2 screws here. You'll also have 2 screws here. When you take the screws out, you'll be able to remove the hood cover here, exposing the actual lenses. These wires ultimately are going to go into the processors in the back here once we mount it. So to get to the lenses, we'll have to remove 2 inner screws here. You want to be careful because it's close to the lenses and you don't really want to touch them too much. By the way, the lenses are very sensitive. Just by touching it, brushing it can actually throw it off focus. So whenever you're working close to the lenses, if it's with the hood or with a screwdriver or screws or your fingers or whatever, you have potential of throwing them out of focus. So just keep that in mind. Take the bottom part off and you actually have the lenses here. Okay, here we have our zoom ring. As you can see, we're using a thumb screw to tighten it. This is our newer lens. The older lens uses the 0.9 millimeter Allen wrench, but we'll just use a thumb screw for these newer lenses. So this is our zoom ring. This is what gives us life size. This is our focus ring. This will be what actually does our fine-tuned focusing and sharpness. These 2 screws are for your yaw or level. So to loosen them, we'll do it later in a few later modules. You loosen them and you actually can level the camera here. Here we have our tilt. So you need a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench to adjust your tilt. And here's your pan. And you would also need a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench to adjust the pan here. So the pan is actually going to be left and right. The tilt down here will be your up and down. So they connect here to a cable. The cable runs along the top here. It will come tie wrapped down. And then, like I mentioned before, ultimately this will plug into the camera processor and back. that is about it with our camera hood. Let's move on to the next module. For this module, we're going to actually mount the entire CTS3000 camera cluster. So here, first off, we're going to mount our processor cluster. As you see, it kind of straddles the frame mount here. For now, we can have it sit. Let's grab a couple screws. All the screws, first off, we're just going to do hand tight. As you'll see here in a few minutes, we're going to need to do some adjustments on our camera clusters, so we don't want to tighten them fully yet. Okay, and this is how our camera processor mounts. Here we have the camera cluster. So a couple key features I want to point out. Really the key points of this VOD are this foam mount here. This needs to mount flatly, lay flatly on the display. So it should sit like right on the display, flat, like that. We also have a foam foot. You can see it right here. This needs to mount right against the display, touching the display. And don't push it too hard because the display is glass, but it definitely needs to be snug against the display. So let's go ahead and mount this onto our camera processor bracket here. Remove these screws. Okay, be careful because we are dealing with some very sensitive equipment with the cameras and the displays and all, so definitely be careful. Remember, we're just going to loosely screw these in for now. Okay, see all the 4 screws? These are the 4 screws that actually hold the camera cluster down to the camera processor bracket. So in a second we'll be tightening those. Now that we have all the screws loosely tightened, we're going to actually do the finishing adjustments here. So first off, what we want to do is we want to bring this up. We want to make sure that there's a gap between this foot pad and the display. We want to make sure there's no gaps in here, and by doing that we're actually going to tighten these up. Doesn't have to be extremely tight because we're going to have to loosen them again, but tighten it so it's flush. The 2 metals here are flush. Bring this up to where it's level, to where the pad's going to sit level and flat on your display. At this point, go ahead and tighten these 2 bolts here as tight as you can. Okay, so now we still have this gap here in the foot. Oops. So we're going to loosen up these bolts again slightly. We should be able to slide this. Remember, be careful because it is glass. Now we also want to make sure that the whole camera assembly doesn't tilt up. We're going to make sure it's still flat while we push it forward. Once we've confirmed this, we can go ahead and tighten down the 4 bolts here. There. And for a final precaution, it's a good idea to use a level to make sure that it's level. You can see it is here. Okay, last couple steps. We want to make sure we plug the corresponding camera into the camera processor. We don't want to mix and match wires here. You can get some very undesirable effects. So we're going to plug our left camera cable to our left processor, our right cable here into our right processor. as you can hear, it'll fit right in. You shouldn't have to force it at all. It'll be a nice smooth snap. And then the center one is going to be down here. You'll hear it snap. And then our very last step, we'll have 2 more bolts. We're going to actually bolt it down into the side. The reason we have so much support here is to reduce any vibrations or movement of the cameras, which would cause an undesirable experience. There. Now we've mounted the camera cluster to our CTS3000. Okay, after we finish mounting the camera cluster, we still need to connect our DVI and Ethernet cables. So I have them labeled here. This is number 1. Basically, you just need to make sure when you disconnect them that you remember which side they were connected to. Either label them or tape them or put them on a certain side. We can't swap the cables. That would definitely cause an undesirable effect. So one here, this is going to connect here. We're going to go ahead and plug in the Ethernet cable like this. Plug in our DVI cable like that. We're going to have to screw it in, make sure it's tight. Now we're going to plug in the right side. There's a DVI cable. Screw it in, make sure it's tight. Now I'm going to plug in the Ethernet cable. Click right in. And lastly, the center one. The center one will go under this thing actually, so it's a little more of a stretch. There. Shortly after you plug them in, you should get link lights on your Ethernet ports here. That means you're plugged in and good to go. So that finalizes the setup for the camera cluster for our CTS3000. Thank you, and let's move on to the next module. For this module, we are actually going to log in to the CTS3000 codecs, and so we can do our fine-tuning and camera focusing from there. So first thing we're going to do is get to a web browser. You'll need to, in the address field, type in the IP address of your system. Your network admin, or you should have that, or whoever set up the system should have that. You'll get a screen. It's, do you want to proceed? Security alert. You type yes, click yes. At this point, you log in with your username and password. And now you're in Cisco TelePresence System Administration. So first thing we need to do is go into Hardware Setup in your left-hand menu. Click on Displays at the very top. You'll see in your new window, you see a list that says Displays, Cameras, Speakers, Microphones, Presentation Devices. Once you click on Display, scroll down and click Start. This will allow you to choose different color temperatures for your displays. So the correct color temperature is 4100K. 4000/4100K is the correct temperature. They often come at 3500K, and this is wrong. This will ruin your experience. So they need to be at 4100K. The rule of thumb is they need to match the lighting in the room. So for telepresence, we require 4100K lights in the ceiling. So this is why we're requiring the displays to be at 4100K. And in a undesirable circumstance, the customer may not have completed remediation, or for some reason may have 3500K lights or some other color temperature of lighting in the room. If this is a case, they need to drop the color temperature of the displays down to match the color temperature of the lighting in the room. So This would be a temporary solution. The customer would then need to remediate the lights and then make sure we go back and readjust the displays back to 4100K. To do that, you can see I'm clicking on the drop-down menu, click on 4000/4100K, hit apply, and you can see the displays change color once I hit apply. So this is how we change our display colors, color temperatures. So when we're done here and we've confirmed that all the displays are at 4100K, click stop. Go up to your list at the top where you have display cameras, click on cameras, and start. This will put us into loopback mode. As you can see now, we can see exactly what's in the room, and the cameras are basically working. So from here on, we're going to talk about focusing the cameras. As you can see on the screen here, we have our 3 displays. Each one has a setup button under it, and ultimately you have the flip video on each display, and we'll show you that in a second. So let's go ahead and click our setup button. Once you click setup button, you'll get 4 more options under that display. One will be auto adjust. The next one is show camera target. You then have show focus targets, and done. So auto adjust is white balance. We'll do that later. Show camera target is what we're going to be doing now. So go ahead and click on show camera target. As you can see now on the center screen, we have a red crosshair, and we have here, and we also have 2 red lines here. This is what we're going to use to actually level and adjust our cameras. So let's go ahead and start our physical adjustment of the cameras. In this module, we're going to actually be doing the camera focusing and tuning. So right off, the terminology we're going to use is yaw, which is a level, pan, which is what we know as left-right, and tilt, which is up-down. So I'm going to be using the camera terminology from now on. So first thing we're going to do is we have our target we talked about in our tools. We're going to actually mount this target to the table. To make sure you have it mounted correctly, underneath the table there's going to be two little holes, one on the left side here, one on the right side. These screws are going to screw in perfectly into the holes. Tighten it up. We also want to make sure, remember, we want to make sure that these stripes on the cardboard are level with the metal frame of your target. There. So now we'll go in and actually start adjusting the cameras. So as you can see here, crosshair is off, the lines are off. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust the pan and the tilt to make the crosshairs line up. So I'm going to bring this up by screwing clockwise. Okay, you can see now we have our horizontal crosshair lined up. Now we're going to pan it to the left a little. Okay, now we have our crosshairs lined up, but we're still, our yaw, our bottom red lines here, are not aligned. So we're going to do a rough alignment here. Loosen up these two screws. with your 3.0 millimeter. We want to make sure on this initial adjustment that the gap is the same. We're going to do a fine tune here a little later, but initially we just want to make sure the gap between the red line and the table on this side, and then the gap between the red line and the table on this side are roughly the same. It looks like my right side's a little bigger. There, so now I'm going to tighten it down. Just going to tighten it a little on each side first and really slowly, because just by tightening it can throw it off. Okay, so now we're going to do a rough zoom. So by using your zoom ring, this first one, we want to zoom it out, and let's focus it up. It's going to definitely take a little playing with. So the goal here to get life size, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the edge. Do you see the edge of this line here? The edge just needs to be touching the display. And the same on this side. Just touching. So once we have that right, we know it's the right zoom. So as you can see, they're still a little in, so we're going to zoom out. As we zoom out, it gets a little more fuzzy, so we're going to have to focus it. Okay, they're touching, but maybe it's a little much, so let's zoom it in just a hair. Still want to focus. Okay, we can see actually that this right one is a little more in than the left one. So what that means is we need to pan it over a little bit, because they should be even on both sides. Sometimes the screws are a little tight, so don't be scared to just twist them. Okay, that's about even on both sides. As you can see, they still extend a little past the screen, so we're going to bring it in, zoom in a little bit. Sharpen it a little bit. And there, now you can see the crosshairs are right on. The bars here are just touching the side. And by doing this correctly, your red line should match up right to the top of the table. Ultimately, that's what we're looking for, is for that red line, the top of the red line, to match up to the top of the table. If it doesn't, you can work with your tilt a little bit. And as you can see, when I screw this here, it's going to bring it up and down. So we're going to focus that until the top of the red line is flush with the table. The top of the table. And there we have our rough adjustment. So now we're actually going to go in. This is our zoom. So our zoom's down. Actually, what we want to do is we're going to lock the thumb screw here. Tighten it down a little bit. Zoom is good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into actually focusing the camera. Now that we've finished our yaw, our pan, our tilt, we're going to do a quick white balance. So go into setup. The very first button is auto adjust. So click the auto adjust button. A screen will pop up that says be sure the camera target is attached to the table in the meeting room. It is. Continue. OK. So what you'll see is you'll see some flickers going by on the display. That's completely normal. You also see a progress bar here on your TelePresence system administration panel. Let it go through the whole process till it meets 100%. There, it's met 100%. You can go ahead and click close. And we're done with our quick white balance. So now we're going to focus our cameras. So let's remove this from the table. Okay. To focus, we're going to need the large target and we're going to need our small target here. So right off, let's get a chair, and you'll also need a chair to balance your large target. So we can start off with just balancing it against here. Make sure it's about 5 feet from the table. We'll actually measure it here in a second to get the exact distance. Our small target's going to be right in this area. At this point, we want to go back to our administration panel. Click on Show Focus Target. You'll see a green box and a red box appear. This is going to tell us where to place our targets. So within the green box, we want to place our small focus target as tightly as possible, as close of a fit as possible within that green box. Most importantly, so the black lines are showing. On our large target, we want the box of black lines, the 2 boxes of black lines up here and here. We want those to be exactly within our red box. Okay, that's rough. So, and lastly, we actually want to make sure that the distance between the top of the small target and the top of the large target is 5 feet. As you can see, this is a little too far back, so we're going to bring it up some. And here we're right on. So, at this point, when no one's in the picture, we want to click Done. Go back to Setup, make sure there's no movement in the picture, nothing's going on. Back to Setup, click on Show Focus Target again. At this point, I'm going to jump over the table. We want to take the zoom and we want to zoom it all the way out. You see these 2 lines here? You should see a green line and a red line. We want to zoom it all the way out so the green line and red line go all the way to the left and it gets completely blurry. Zoom it back in so the green line and red line go to the right edge, touch the right edge, and go back all the way again. And what we're doing here is we're training the codec. Training the codec's focal points. So once we've done that, the object of this tool is to get that green line and red line to come as close to possible to even with each other. It should be somewhere in this area, and that's actually about good. As long as they're within a couple inches, that should be fine. So right when they're level with each other. By the way, be really careful when you're tightening it, because just by tightening it, it's going to throw it off. Things, as you can see, and once you start playing with it, are very sensitive. Okay, so that's going to be fine. That's about 2-3 inches. You also want to step back, get out of the light. You'll see it jumps a little, and that's just the lighting difference for when you're in the light. So step back, get out of the light. This is less than 3 inches, so that's fine. Then you might want to double check with the person. Pull up a chair. Lean forward a little bit. Make sure you look clear. Lean back a little bit. As you can see, I'm clear when I'm forward or leaning back, which means we've focused the camera well. So at this point, we're done focusing our center display. We can go on to our side displays. So go back to your administration panel, click Done for your center. So remember, when we're adjusting the lens on the left or right side, the biggest difference, as opposed to adjusting in the center, is these black bars here, which are on your white paper target. So again, to reiterate the importance, we want the black bar, we want the edge of this black bar to be just touching the horizontal red line, or the vertical red line. And then on the right side, you shouldn't see the black bar at all. So the only difference between getting the correct zoom on this left side as opposed to the right side is now you have a vertical line, vertical red line going down your right side of the display. You want to align, you have the camera here, you want to align this red line with your black line here. The black line should just be touching the edge. You're not going to see the other black line on the left side, and your crosshair is going to be perfectly aligned. So let's clean this up a little bit. Now that we're done focusing all our cameras, we want to confirm that the table edge is aligned properly. To do this, go back into your System Administration panel. Under your left, center, right screens, you'll see a button that says Flip Video on each display. Go ahead and click that. Give it a second and you'll see your video gets flipped. So what we're looking for here is alignment of this edge of the table. So as you can see, that edge is right on with that edge, and it looks like one consistent piece of wood, one consistent table. So that shows we did the tuning on that side correctly. Same thing here. This edge aligns with that edge, again making it look like one consistent, even table. So one other thing we're going to do to make sure that we're still right on, go unflip video in each display. So the video is going to go back to how it was. Go to Setup, Show Camera Target. And yes, as you can see, the red lines are still even. The top of the red line is still even with the top of the table. So two important points for why we're double checking and doing this. One is because from the other view, from the people viewing you, you want that table to look like one consistent, seamless table. If you have a gap there, it's obviously gonna show the technology, and we don't want that. So we want it to look like one consistent table. Another issue is with multi-point, and you have different segments and different tables and different locations, we need to make sure that every system is aligned perfectly here, and making sure that the top of the red line is at the top of the table. Because if one's off, even if the table edge is perfect, but yet let's say the red line's off, when you get into multi-point, you're going to see the gaps. So it's very important we keep those lines right on. So with that, we are done focusing the camera. Okay, for our final step, we're going to put the hood back on the camera. So one thing we're going to do while we're putting the hood on is make sure and you leave your crosshair and your camera target up. Because sometimes when you place the hood, it can actually readjust your table height. So we want to grab the bottom piece. Remember, when you're dealing with the camera lenses here, you want to touch them as little as possible. Because just by a slight movement, it could completely throw the camera out of focus. Put your screws in. It's a little tricky, especially since you have to be so careful. We screwed on the bottom plate now. Check, make sure your lines are still on. They are. Okay, this is where we gotta make sure that the adjustment of the camera doesn't shift. So the cable might be sticking up here. Make sure your cables are out of the way. Put your hood on. Should fit right into place. Take your screws. Screw it down firm. Double checking your lines. The lines are still right on. Okay, so now the hood is properly assembled, the lines are right on, and we're done. So last step, click Done. Make sure and get out of your administration screen. You want to log out, because if you stay logged in and someone tries to call in, it's going to give you an error. So you want to make sure and log out. And you're done. So that's about it. Thank you very much for your time and learning to focus our CTS3000. Okay, in this module, I want to go through some of the troubleshooting steps for white balance and for our color adjustment. Sometimes the colors may not be desirable, meaning you might have a blue haze, or it may look washed out, or there may be, too much blue, too much red. It's basically a white balance issue. If it's any color or lighting issue, it's a white balance issue. Of course, you want to make sure that the customer has the correct ceiling lights, the indirect, 100% indirect lighting. But assuming they do, let's talk about some troubleshooting we can go through with white balance. Let's start from the right. We do auto adjust. Be sure the camera is attached to the table in the meeting room. So what we're going to do now, put the target back up. So what happens sometimes if there's too much light, or let's say the lighting is not 100% indirect, you get hot spots, and it's very strong. You get some too much reflectivity, basically. So what we're doing is, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to tilt this back 15 degrees. This allows it to capture more of the direct light, making the target brighter, which is going to make it actually make the camera darken the room. So if it's too bright or too washed out, we're going to tilt it back 15 degrees. We're going to do a white balance again. Okay. Let it do its white balance. Keep it, make sure it's tilted a little bit. Make sure, sometimes you can even see on the display the lighter side on the top of the light, the direct light. Okay, 100%. Remove it. Take a peek. Yeah, that actually took care of a lot of this white haze we were having. So we're going to go ahead and do this one more time to the center one. Done. Set up. Auto adjust. Okay. Tilt it back 15 degrees. It's okay if you hold it. You don't need to, if you screw it in, you won't be able to tilt it back 15 degrees, so you want it unscrewed. Now you may wonder if you need the whole screen filled with white, and you don't. It's just the majority of the screen. The more white, the better, but the way they've designed the product, this does just fine. Okay, it's at 100%. A lot better. Okay, so for another troubleshooting technique is whenever you see a blue haze over your display. So what this is caused by, or blue background, blue walls, some blue film. What causes this is, if you can notice, the table is kind of red. And so usually this only happens when you have a direct lighting situation. Remember, our ceiling lighting needs to be 100% indirect. So if there is some direct light, usually what happens is it's going to reflect that light off the table. The table is red, so it's going to reflect a red light onto your target while you're white balancing. What the camera is going to do during the white balance is going to try to counter that red, and so it's actually going to counter it with the blue. So then what you end up with is like this blue haze, over your displays. So to troubleshoot that, what we want to do is grab something. I have another target. It can be a piece of cardboard. It can be a sheet. Something white is preferable. So like I said, I'm going to lay out another target and cover that segment. Okay, see how we're covered here? Go to your admin, setup, auto adjust, hit OK. Remember, we want this again to be also at a 15-degree angle, and let it go through its steps. Okay, 100% done. Let's check it out. Oh yeah, a lot better. So that's it with our tuning VOD for a CTS3000 camera cluster. If you have any more questions, please feel free to contact the BU, the TSBU, at ask-telepresence-technical@cisco.com. Thank you very much. Have a great day.